Hello and welcome again to Casual Magic. This past weekend for me, it was the Corset 2020 pre-release weekend, and that meant one thing. Woo! I did it! I picked up my box of Modern Horizons that's been sitting there for a month and finally got around to that. I was in Japan. Sorry. So, pre-release, you get your 6-packs, you get your die, and best of luck to you trying to make a deck. So, I went just because it's one of the few times that I have free time, and I thought, well, why not? I'll go on Saturday, I'll give it a shot. And I open it up. What do I get? Right out of the box is my promo, Dungeon Geist, which is originally from Dark Ascension. And yeah, I mean, it's useful. It's 2 blue and 2 for a 3/3 flyer, and then as the bonus, you permanently lock down a creature as long as this thing's on the board. So that's okay, but not exactly what I was hoping for as far as useful cards, I'll put it that way. So when I went through, eventually because of one of the mythics that I had, I thought, okay, I'll make a 3-color deck. Why not? Let's see if I can get some control out of it. So I was pretty much doing an elemental theme. And as you can see, here's a flyer, and I really did not have that many flyers. Instead, it's more things like, you know, bouncing creatures back to my hand, being able to lock things down a second time, a Dungeon Geist. Another one of my 6-pack rares was another Dungeon Geist, so, on summon, negate, bone to ash, just to get some stuff out of my way. Blight Beetle, the one time that this came in handy, where it says creatures your opponents control can't add +1/+1 counters on them, there was a black, I think it was like a demon card, and it would come into play with a certain number of counters on it based on something like the number of creature cards in his graveyard. So the player put that out, and I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, and pass the turn? I was like, well, that thing dies. And he's like, why? So like, well, because you can't put +1/+1 counters, so that thing basically comes out with 0. And he's like, ah, oh, why did I do that? So this did get used once. Sorcerer of the Fang, just, you know, it's okay. Unholy Indenture. I mean, it's nice to have a creature come back with a +1/+1 counter on it, but I never really got any good use out of it. Just timing-wise, it didn't work out. Duress, just standard one. Murder. Foil Murder. Yay! Actually, out of a bunch of the foil cards, as far as commons go, I'm okay with that. Heal the Glade just to gain 3 life, and then at one point it bounced this thing and then got another 3 life out of it. Barkhide Troll, just as a nice 3/3 for 2. Netcaster Spider to at least block some flyers. Overgrowth Elemental, that I had enough elementals in this deck that some of my opponents were basically targeting this, because if other elementals were dying, then this was getting bigger, so that did have some use. Feral Invocation, just as a good enchantment. Growth Cycle. This is good. It gets an additional +2/+2 until end of turn for each card named Growth Cycle in your graveyard. Sadly, this is the only one I had, so darn. Risen Reef. This thing is a workhorse. I am shocked that this thing's an uncommon, because whenever you have another elemental enter the battlefield, which if you're able to do some sort of elemental tribal thing, it's reasonably often. And then you can, you know, just look at the top card of your library, put a land card on tapped, or put the other card into your hand. So it gets its work. And yeah, it's a 1/1, so it can die pretty easily. But honestly, a blue-green and 1, that's not that bad. Moldervine Reclamation, just kind of a late game throw in, and I only used it once. So this is the card that I built around. Yurok the Desecrated. It's got Death Touch, it's got Lifelink, it's a 3/5. That by itself is cool. But then if a permanent entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. And I had enough things in here, like Frostlinks or Dungeon Geist, so things like that, that if I could get Yurok on the board and hold off on something and then be able to get basically 2 effects out of it, it really, really came in handy. So honestly, out of the cards that I had, I did really like playing with this card. Plus being Death Touch and Lifelink was good because even late game, there are occasional times that, you know, my opponent would swarm in. And it's like, okay, I've got all this stuff. Okay, cool. We'll trade all these creatures. And then meanwhile, I've got Death Touch to take out something huge of theirs. And then get my, you know, 3 points of lifelink out of it. And slowly come back. So it's a good card. It's a really good card. Prismite just basically for some mana filtering. And then Jungle Hollow. And then my lands. So it was okay. At least to start, I went up against a... Let's see. Just do that so at least you know what the deck was based around. So the first game I went up against a guy who was doing a primarily black deck, and then he splashed in a little bit of blue. It was okay, but I was able to keep him mostly under control, win game 1. Game 2 came along, and he was playing a bit conservatively. And so I was holding on to a pump spell, and I thought, you know what, if I can just somehow bust through, then I can use one of my creatures, pump it by 3, and I can win, because he's only got 4 life left. And so I took a really, really big gamble because he had a pretty big board state. And I thought, okay, he's going to trust the fact that he's got 4 life. And so at some point late game, I basically just said, okay, you know what, we're almost out of time. Swing with everything. And I swung with all my creatures. And I'm sitting there doing the math. It's like, okay, so if I do this and he's got 1 creature with lifelink, that can get him to 5. So I need one of my creatures who's like a 2 to get through. I've got my couple flyers, but he can probably block those if he wants, but then they'll die. So, all right, let's risk it. Let's see what happens. So I swung out with everything, and sure enough, he lined up his blocks however he wanted. He had one thing with lifelink 1. That way at least he would gain 1 life from that. But then for whatever reason, he wanted to hang on to one of his flyers. That way he could try and get through and start to really get me down. And then the only way I could attack at that point was because the previous turn he had attacked with his giant, like, 8/8 flyer thing, which he could buff if he spent life, but unfortunately he was so low on life, he couldn't get any further on it. So he let Dungeon Geist go through. And it's like, okay, you're going to be at 5 with your lifelink, and here we go, pump spell, so now it's a 6/6. That's lethal? And he's like, oh, good game. It's like, oh. That was luck. Then the second game I played against a guy who had a Boros deck, and oh my god, my ass was handed to me. That guy, he just had, you know, shocks, pump spells, flying goblins. It was great. You know, quick 2-0, and, you know, he went on his merry way after we had a long chat about the cards, because I said, you know, I'm coming into this completely blind. I didn't read more than about 5 spoilers for the set. I have no idea what's good, what's bad. I'm just showing up to play. But seeing how his Boris deck worked, I thought, you know what? I've got my extra cards here, and I've got some time, so yeah, you know what? I've got some other stuff that I want to use. You know what? Screw it. I'm making a backup deck. So this is my backup deck, which I played in games 3 and 4. Sounds pretty stupid, right? But, well, I'll show you what I had, and then we'll get to the story. So, Yoked Ox is a good opening blocker, Hanged Executioner to get a spirit token and also be able to exile something if I want, Flyer, Vigilance, another Flyer, plus life gain, Squad Captain, it's okay if you're able to build up a board state. I don't think I got her out in any of the games. Angelic Gift to give something flying. Eternal Isolation, just a removal spell. Didn't get to use it. Raise the Alarm to make soldier tokens. Couple Inspired Charges is a pump spell. The only bad thing about that was double white, and I just was not getting double white one of the games. Scorch Splitter, as far as red. This one's actually nice. Early game. Whenever it attacks, it deals 1 damage to the player or planeswalker it's attacking. So, if you can get this thing out, it's at least a point of guaranteed damage. So, that's not bad. And if your opponent can't get anything out early, you'll get some value out of this. Chandra's Embercat, it's a 2/2 for 2, and then you can add mana for an elemental spell or a Chandra planeswalker spell. Marauding Raptor, really fun. Really, really fun. So your creature spells cost 1 less to cast, and then whenever a creature enters the battlefield under control, it deals 2 damage to it. If a dinosaur is dealt damage this way, Marauding Raptor gets +2/+0 until end of turn. But if it's late game and you're getting out big, beefy creatures, who cares? They're cheaper to get out, and yeah, they get pinged when they first hit the board, but okay, I'm totally fine with that. So that's a very, very good card. Goblin Smuggler, another creature with power 2 or less, can't be blocked this turn. That was kind of a nice effect to have late game. Chandra Spitfire, just whenever an opponent is dealt non-combat damage, Chandra Spitfire gets +3/+0 until end of turn. So if you've got a decent damage spell, then, surprise, this thing can do some more damage. Actually, I had an opponent take that thing out. It's like, that thing's going to get crazy. It's like, you don't know that, but sure. And yeah, I could see where this thing could get easily out of control. Lava Keen Brawler just is a kind of a big butt, and then gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each elemental you control. Daggersoul Aeronaut's got flying when it's your turn. Fire Elemental is a big beefy thing. Ripscale Predator as a even bigger, beefier thing, plus its menace. So, pretty good late game. Maniacal Rage, just to give something a buff and it can't block. Infuriate is a pump spell. Shock is instant damage. Act of Treason, always good. Then Chandra Novice Pyromancer, so I could give my elementals more. A little bit more, even though I didn't have too many elementals in this thing. I could, add 2 mana, or the main thing, she can deal 2 damage to any target. So basically for her, I was getting more value out of being able to ping something for 2 damage, whether it be a creature or my opponent, and then buff my elementals. Just sometimes the elementals were out, sometimes they weren't, so okay. And then, hey! People told me this is a great card, and I was like, oh, okay, sure. So here's how this goes. So it's 4 and 2 red, 6 loyalty, and it can't be countered. All right, great. So the +2, each opponent gets an emblem with at the beginning of your upkeep, this emblem deals 1 damage to you. So that helps put a clock on the game. -3 deals 3 damage to each non-elemental creature. So if you're going elemental heavy, then it's kind of a small creature board wipe. And then -X, then it deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker. If a permanent was dealt damage this way, would die this turn, exile it instead. So I will tell this story here in a second. So the first time that I played with this deck, I went up against a young woman. She said, oh, how long have you been playing Magic? I'm like, my first cards were when my friend whose brother went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison came back from Gen Con and had these cards for this new game called Magic the Gathering. And so I've been playing since Unlimited, and I mowed lawns all summer to get my first box of Revised. So, long time. And she'd been playing for a couple of years because her brother got her into playing Magic. And so I played with this deck and just wrecked her in about 10 minutes and was 2-0. I was like, oh my god, I am so sorry. I didn't realize that this deck would work that well. I should have started with this. And then she's like, oh, can you play again? You know, we got time. Can I play against that deck instead? I'm like, yeah, sure. And then slowly ground out a couple more wins, even one where it was just basically absolute last minute, last turn, and I was able to squeak out a win. It was just like, oh man, don't get discouraged. Please continue to play Magic. You're a good player. You just need some better cards in your pre-release kit. So I was really, really shocked as to how well it did. And then in my last game, I went up against more or less this deck. And so at some point when I was able to get Chandra out, I put out the emblem. Then my opponent got out, you know, Yarok finally. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I'll just roll her down 5 and, you know, bye-bye Yarok. So that's good board removal. Meanwhile, you know, just like pinging away, taking out stuff. He's got things keeping my stuff under control, but I don't care. I'm just still super aggressive. Plus I had Marauding Raptor as a flyer, just because flying dinosaurs sounds silly. I mean, I know pterodons, but still, it's Magic. Everything's possible. So then I got to a point late game where I was like, well, can I roll this up again? I mean, what happened? I don't. You know what happens? I don't know what happens. Judge! And I called the judge over and I said, okay, so if I do the +2 to roll up again, my opponent's already got the emblems, so what happens? And he said, the emblems stack. It's like, excuse me? He's like, the emblems stack, so then he'll have 2 emblems, so he'll be taking 2 points of damage at every upkeep. I'm like, that sounds broken. He's like, I know, it's a really strong card. Oh my god! I should have been doing that earlier. Okay, roll it up so you get another emblem? So he had some creature that I think it was pinging me for a point of damage every upkeep, but now with Chandra it was like, here's 2 and it's late game and I'm just swinging in and swinging in. And so for that one, the first 2 games were reasonably balanced, where I won game 1 and then he won game 2, and then game 3 it was just, you know, all out, just total aggression. And I don't even remember what ridiculously high life total, like 19 or something, I finished with, but I mean, it was fast. And once I was able to ramp up and have, you know, elementals come out and they're pinged and then they're on the board hanging out, I've got my couple of flyers in the air, I've got Chandra, you know, basically giving him emblems to have additional damage every single turn, plus being able to kind of act as a individual damage source to basically pick off anything big that he put out. It was great. And eventually he got to some point in the game where he had semi-locked my stuff now, and it's like, okay, here's Chandra. She's going to blow up Dungeon Guy, so I will get my creature back. Then I'm going to use Active Treason. I'm going to get your biggest creature, and then just swing out. And he's just like, I've only got 1 creature, and then just bam, everything else got through, and I won. And like, oh my god, this is a good deck. So what I didn't realize was this is a good card. This is a really, really good card. So if you got this in a pre-release pack, you had a very, very good chance of winning. And I wish I would have realized that at the beginning when I was trying to force this, because this 3-color thing was okay, but not quite. Now, could I have hung out, you know, very well against a, you know, all flyers deck, which I think the guy who finished first did? Probably not. You know, maybe if I would have gotten Chandra out, I could have rolled her down and kind of did a board wipe for everything small. But generally speaking, at least for the other 2 matchups that I had in the afternoon, they just were quite under my control, except for just one individual game, which kind of ground out that my opponent won. So if you do pre-release at all, or I guess, you know, it's past pre-release weekend now, but if you happen to get a pre-release pack and you can do some kind of crazy Boros thing, or even an Is It thing, do it, because red is pretty good in this set. So that being said, as far as some other cards, just random ones that I had that I can show you, Rule of Law, it was one that I thought would be good, but I wasn't totally scared as far as the pre-release goes about players casting more than one spell per turn. I thought, this thing's use is really, really limited, so I'll hold off on it. But as far as EDH goes, yeah, absolutely, I want that. Devout Decree, thought about it, and for those kind of huge black creatures that this set has, I thought about putting it in, but then I thought, you know, the time that I need it, and I put it in for a second game, then sure enough, it's going to be a giant, you know, blue creature, green creature or something. So, maybe that's not going to work. Aerial Assault, just one of my few other flyers. You can see my sheer lack of flyers. Audacious Thief, this is so whenever it attacks, you draw a card and lose 1 life. So this is one that my opponent was getting a little bit of card draw out of. And it's got its use. I shocked it pretty early on and swung with everything, just because it's like, I'm tired of you getting card draw. Here we go. Undead Servant, it's great if you have a ton of them. I only had 1. Fathom Fleet Cutthroat, I mean, it's cool. So you can do damage to something and then, you know, then destroy that creature when this thing comes into play, but I didn't really have enough in black. Vampire, that helps out with life loss, more zombie stuff, bone splinters, life stuff. As far as red, Dragon Mage, I thought about it, and then it's like, you know, it costs 7, which in a pre-release game isn't going to happen that often. So, I'll just keep it out. Flame Sweep, 2 damage to each creature except for creatures you control with flying, which was great, but I didn't necessarily have a ton of flyers, so kept it out. Reduced Ashes is good removal. Generic 3/3, another giant spider with reach. Silverback Shaman is 5/4 with trample. It's okay, but again, wasn't doing green. Shiny. Wolfkin Bond to get a token. Natural End to destroy an enchantment. Didn't do Is It. Thought about it for a little bit, and then thought didn't really have enough to support it. That was really strong. But that's a decent card. Stone Golem, Manifold Key, target creature can't be blocked this turn, so that's a good ability. Violet Dragonfire, and Grass Digger's Cage is my last rare, which, yeah, it's nice to have. I mean, as far as like a modern sideboard, but am I really using it in this set? No. So, Oh, the tokens. I have to show you the tokens. There's full art tokens in this set. These are pretty. Really like that soldier token. I'll have to try and collect all the tokens. So anyways, the nice thing that I did get was, for winning, 5 packs. How is that possible? How did I do well enough to actually win packs? And out of, I got the printout here, 35 people in this event, I finished 8th. That's incredible. And yeah, I know you're going to sit back and you're going to go, well, you had a Chandra, so obviously, you know, if you have a Chandra, then you win. But no, I mean, it does take a tiny bit more effort, but yeah, she really, really helps. So that being said, let me clean up my mess here, and then we will open packs, and I will just go left to right. And let's see what I won. Because other than Chandra, I mean, what was one? Lotus? Not Lotus Vale. Lotus Field, I think? Like, that was one that I was like, ooh, that one looks really great for EDH. But I don't really know necessarily what's good in this set, values or anything. I'm just looking through this pretty much like you are. Actually, when you're watching this video, you probably already have all the prices memorized. I think I already had this pack, except for the uncommons, but the commons, I think I have all of those. All right, Grief. Yay, another Risen Reef! Yay! That was such a good card. Let's see, Dragon Mage. Oh, Leyline of Sanctity! I already have a play set of those, but you know what? It's a great card. I am totally okay with that. Let's see, I'll push that up there. So I hope everyone had a good pre-release weekend. More so this goofy thing. So it's a 3/3 when it enters the battlefield, scry 2. There's so many people I saw playing blue have that thing. Let's see. Pacifism's in this set, that's cool. Let's see, Loaming Shaman. Scampering Scorcher, Roll the Rhine Reformation. Hey! Woo! I've got the set! Yeah! Alright, where's the other one? Alright, there we go. It's one big, happy Chandra family. Uncommon, rare, and mythic. That's hilarious. Okay. Yes. It was a good day. At this point, I don't even care what's in the pack. It's probably more dungeon guys. Take more shocks. Let's see. Blood for Bones. Manifold Key. Huh. What was this one? 2 and 3 blue, 5/5 flying. When Cavalier of Gales enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards and put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. When Cavalier of Gales dies, shuffle it into its owner's library and then scry 2. I did play against this one. This one was one that it was an annoying 5/5 flyer, and I blew it up, and then my opponent shuffled it back into his library, but then, sure enough, about 5 turns later, then it came back out again. I was like, oh, how do I get past this thing? So actually in a pre-release kind of a limited 40 card deck like this, that's actually really, really good card. I don't think it's necessarily going to automatically win you the game, but it's a very, very good card. And if you're playing blue and you have it, I would definitely include it. So let's see, Rapid Bite. Let's see, Disfigure, Salvager of Ruin, Yarok's Fenlurker. Enters the battlefield, each opponent exiles a card from their hand. Oh, that's nice for 2. What? Grassdigger Cage. Again! Okay, well, I think that means I officially have a playset now. I've got two of the original ones. I want to say they're from Innistrad, and then I've got 2 of the M20 ones. So, sure, why not? It's useful, anyways. I'd rather have useful cards than completely useless card. Oh, Reckless Airstrike! I remember this one. Deals 3 damage to target creature with flying or destroy target artifact for 1 red. Yes, love it. Let's see. Ox. Growth Cycle. All right, load up on those. Shocks. Captivating Gyre. Return up to 3 target creatures to their owner's hands. Oh man, why didn't I have that? Oh, Meteor Golem's in this set. That is a good card. That is fun. I mean, yeah, it's not gonna necessarily win you the game, but destroy target non-land permanent. So it's like, oh, you have a Chandra? Okay, cool. Here's 7. Gone. It's a good card. Thought Distortion. Target opponent reveals their hands. Exile all non-creature, non-land cards from that player's hand and graveyard. Fun. Let's see. What is this? Voracious Hydra. X and 2 green. Trample 0/1. Enters the battlefield. Let's see. Trample. Enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. Enters the battlefield. Choose 1. Double the number of +1/+1 counters on Voracious Hydra. Or Voracious Hydra fights target creature you don't control. I could definitely see that going into some sort of counter build. It's got some use. I don't necessarily think this is going to be an expensive card, but I could find a home for that. Oh, Nate. Epicure of Blood. Shiny. Watercliffs. Oh, okay. Yeah, cool. Emblem. Emblem to go with Chandra. Yep, I'll just throw that over there. All right. So, overall, as you can see, I had a wonderful time. I hope your pre-release went as well as mine did. I hope you won packs. I hope they were awesome too. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Have fun and subscribe if you want. And until next time, good luck.